I want to verbally put my disclaimer here that I am going to sincerely examine the emotional ramifications and emergent themes of the Five Nights at Freddy's series overall as a whole. So that means this will contain mention of children in peril and intense distress, and also, the dead ones. I talk about poverty and neglect and some other really emotionally charged topics, so I need you to take care of yourself for me. Okay? Okay. Also, the art I'm making heavily features staring directly into the camera, so if you want to hear what I have to say but can't deal with that, open another tab and play archived flash games or something. Okay, that's everything. So, last month, the Security Breach Ruin trailer dropped, and I heard this line,
"Don't give up on me yet,"
and have not known peace since. We all know, of course, that Security Breach was like a giant swing as far as the direction of the franchise going forward is concerned. The FNAF lore girlies, who I am sure make up a not inconsiderable amount of the people who have clicked on this video, will point back to the publishing of the Silver Eyes as the first time FNAF did anything that shifted the paradigm that hard. And they are right, but the thing is, I have never actually been a FNAF lore girly. I know all of the lore, but I feel like knowing the lore and being like a lore girly are two different things. I was strangely drawn to this franchise through the eldritch magics of aesthetics and theme, the only reason I personally do anything. And I'm not talking themes like a theme park, I mean like themes you could write an AP English 4-level thesis statement about. Just like I'm about to do right now. I'm gonna go into this on the assumption that you at least have a passable grasp on the established FNAF lore as it stands in June of 2023. Cool? Cool. On paper, Five Nights at Freddy's original flavor should not have been even a little bit tense for me. The gameplay loop is functionally very reaction time and memorization based, which should have just frustrated me. The Uncanny Valley horror element failed to unsettle me because I, for whatever reason, was never particularly affected by the Uncanny Valley, and the Vengeance Ghost based lore behind it didn't make me go, ooh, spooky. It made me go, oh no, the poor ghosties, they must be so upset. And especially since I, as a middle schooler with no money, was experiencing the game vicariously through Let's Play videos, surely this was mostly going to be a silly, goofy time watching performers flail comically in front of a camera. And yet, FNAF succeeded in its spookiness endeavors somehow. I was positively engrossed in its atmosphere and execution. There's a Scruffy video about how well constructed the sound design alone in that game is, and in it, they say the whole premise and structure of the game is a nightmare scenario that the player can't wake up from, only endure until the alarm goes off. The aesthetics and mechanics force stress and pressure upon the player, and accent the very base emotions the game evokes in a person. The power mechanic alone is the primary drive behind the anxious, if one thing goes wrong, I'm fucked mindset the player is progressively shunted into over the course of each night. The unforgiving gracelessness, the lack of wiggle room, the constant tension of frustration and powerlessness colors the whole game. It's something you experience in poverty and nightmares and in detention on your last strike before getting sent to alternative school. Emotionally identical experiences. The concept alone is very raw and surreal. The Uncanny Valley elements mooshing up against how the objective of the game is to simply avoid an absurd demise. Then there's the cluttered, trash-covered desk space, the poor lighting, the dated technology, the grime, the hallucinations. All of it traps you in a place that is first and foremost unpleasant. The man on the phone is unnervingly chill about the mortal peril. There is no home you start in that you want to go back to. There's just you, the power meter, the cameras, and some possessed animatronics. And don't people usually point to puppets and animatronics and say this thing is possessed as an exaggeration? Why is this happening? Why am I still here? The baseness of the terror, contrasted with the artifice of having a shitty job you, for some absurd reason, cannot just walk out of and quit, created this interesting thematic dance. There is no underlying call to action, introspective message going on in original FNAF. No questions are being asked. It simply plucks the pieces of you that recoil and hyperventilate at the prospect of misery and danger. You don't want this. No one wants this. And yet it is. The addition of books to the franchise as it continued on irrevocably altered this thematic voicing. I want you to remember back to when it was this fun, cool piece of intrigue that the animatronic jump scare game had lore. The obfuscation of the lore in the first game was a feature meant to mess with the player when they changed cameras and give overachievers something to reward them for their attention. The lore was flavor text to make the situation worse. You weren't being hunted by suspiciously buggy animatronics, you were being hunted by the blindly vengeful spirits of children whose bodies were never buried. Why does the screen keep flashing, "It's me"? Are you the one who murdered these children, or is Golden Freddy just really keen on introducing themselves? We don't know! When Coffin created the Silver Eyes, the lore stopped being a weird void with a very small handful of anchors. It became a changing story with names and a timeline. He still wasn't telling us anything about it, but it was an ongoing narrative now. When the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex books started getting made, that story became a huge anthology exploring this world meant to resonate with 4th and 5th graders who like horror. And so, like an improvised melody telephoning its way through different instruments, those bass, visceral themes of discomfort and primal fear swirled together with artifice, developed into new directions to suit their new vessels. The scattershotification of story concepts and compounding additions of more games within the slowly mutating thing that the series has become necessitates the addition of horror's non-visceral. That world we are visiting cannot be some dead, empty darkness surrounding our awful little box that we peek out of to check and make sure nothing's reaching inside to get us. It's gotta have personality beyond the environments in our camera screens and the aggression patterns of homicidal mascots. When you do that fleshing out, the chosen setting and elements of a themed pizza place for children is no longer a simple tool to get to the uncanny valley and add a playful absurdity. These are children who will never get to grow up, whose parents will never see them again, and who were killed in and now perpetually haunt a place that was ostensibly made for them to have fun and host birthday parties. You know, the celebration of joy and life that just about every culture, as far as I am aware, deliberately marks as an occasion of great personal significance. The inherent irony of the time and place of their deaths, the betrayal of their implicit trust by a man in a funny mascot suit, this is no longer stress-based terror. There is now a dude that we know the name of who is using our place of work to enact his dead kids-centric agenda, and we are caught in the crossfire. That emptiness choking the establishment of FNAF 1 that made us feel helpless becomes something sickeningly mournful when you know that this was originally a place made with love and creativity and optimism in the heart of one of its founders, only to have his child taken from him by his spiteful, selfish business partner. There used to be light here. This used to be a nice place. And now, no matter how many times Fazbear Entertainment tries to cover it up and make it shiny and new, no matter how much anyone wants to put the broken things back together and put all the agony to rest, the spite and the anger and the grief remain forever. The buildings remember. The metal remembers. The ghosts remember. Nothing is ever truly forgotten, only repressed. Things can and will die in a way that matters, but their remnants linger in ways that matter more. You don't want this. No one wants this. And yet, it is. Outside of what the primary Afton-based story has to add, a commonality across many of the anthology stories is people, usually children, clawing for some kind of control and agency and peace in their lives because they have been rendered limited and powerless because of course it comes back to the power mechanic. They're in the awful little box now, and they have to stumble around in the dark with minimal help, getting jump scared and punished for bumping against things in their search for comfort. Fundamentally, these books are made up of vignettes about either children or incredibly unwell adults having their already discontented lives overturned completely by haunted jump scare nonsense. The very first Fazbear Fright story got made fun of a lot for the time-traveling ball pit, but what struck me about Into the Pit was how it portrayed the plight of this kid who remembers being able to have nice things before the factory his dad works at laid everyone off and most of his friends moved away because their families couldn't afford to live there anymore. He has to spend his summer monotonously bopping between the library and a terrible, dilapidated, unsanitary pizza restaurant waiting for his parents to finish working at their jobs because his mom isn't free to stay at home with him or take him places anymore. He's powerless in all this, and his parents keep apologizing and asking him to chin up, and he kind of hates them for it, even if he really doesn't want to. And then, his only escape from this poverty-stricken reality his life and his town have become, the time-traveling ball pit, eats and replaces his dad! Now, this might come as a surprise to nobody who is past the age of small, but the intended audience for a piece of art is a very important factor in its formation. Original FNAF had a very universal appeal. There was something about it that resonated with the same strength across demographics. As I established earlier, the Fazbear Frights books are aimed highly at the 10 to 15-year-old demographic. They are definitely not the only ones that it's for, but you can tell as you're reading that they're very deliberately and consciously included in the audience base. It's not a coincidence. This means that the horror in the books is uniquely suited to resonate with children. Even if you somehow had an idyllic childhood, where you had an unconditionally nice and loving family and community, where hardship was some far-off distant concept that you knew you were safe from. I'm sorry I sound so sarcastic, I just cannot imagine someone having a childhood like that, but anyway. Even then, you had to grapple with powerlessness growing up. Children, both by their nature and because of the basic structure of human social bonds, are not powerful in the ways that most adults fully take for granted. Power fantasies for children frequently involve simply being cool and independent and relied upon. Destiny chose them, some 12-year-old from Argentina, to protect the planet. They are the only extra super special person who is qualified to go on this important world-saving quest. Everyone is counting on them to stand up to evil, and if someone says they're too young for this, then they're wrong! FNAF, however, is very firmly not a power fantasy. It is, in fact, probably the exact polar opposite of that. And yet, much like myself all the way back in 2014, children remain enamored with this franchise meant to fill you with a sense of anxiety and discomfort. It's entrancing and cathartic to experience, like all good horror. I've never seen anyone write children the way Fazbear Frights writes children. Like, in Roald Dahl books, children and adults are allowed to be horrible little monsters, but there is something so tangible and human about the ways in which kids in FNAF are allowed to just be bad kids. I think the only time I have ever seen anyone write poverty and death the way that all the FNAF books write about it is in, like, Charles Dickens novels. And poverty and needless death looked very different in 1843. Into the Pit. It is by the skin of his teeth that the main character in Into the Pit manages to get his damn dad back. And the entire time, the horrific, silent, uncanny valley bunny suit thing he gets replaced with is being treated by everyone else like it totally is his dad. I understand you're upset by this whole situation, Oscar, but you can't be treating your father like that. We're all trying our best. He is being gaslit by the narrative! This experience is regularly a thing kids are subjected to. The experience of being upset and distressed deeper than you ever have been because you're a child who has not been on this mortal coil long enough to experience any upset or distress deeper than this right now, and being told you ought to behave with grace and maturity because no one has the time or energy to so much as humor you. People just expecting you to act composed and prepared, and telling you to calm down over this thing that is very obviously affecting you and no one else. Once again, it's an emotionally identical experience, except now it's cranked up to like 9,000. Now I bet at this point, you're all pleading at your screens, but Jams, if that is your real fake YouTube name, what on earth does that one Ruin trailer line have to do with any of this? You were very specific about which line it was. You edited it into the video and everything. When is it coming back? It's either that or you forgot about it completely, which I do not blame you for. Security Breach was the first game where we had character dialogue in the primary gameplay environment. No longer are the character voices monologuing at the silent, formless entity that is the player. Now we, the player, are steering around a sassy lost child that is interacting with the other characters on his own terms. We, the player, also are very aware of how much danger all children in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise are in. And so, the player functionally has two primary choices on how we navigate his character when piloting Gregory around the Pizzaplex. We either get really attached to and protective of him and interact with him and the world through that lens, or we engage with him as though he is the mask we put on and embody to go through this story. Do you want the experience of keeping an eye out for danger as a person responsible for the safety of this child, or as the child themselves? And we are free to switch between them anytime, or choose both at the same time if you stretch your brain out enough. Gregory pleading with presumably Cassie, but functionally the player, not to give up on him, hit me like a shot through the chest, because one of the most terrifying prospects for a child is to be cast aside and ignored, to be neglected and given up on. You have no power in this world. You are forced to rely on others, and when the people with the most power over you decide you aren't worth reaching out to and helping and caring about, you have nothing but yourself to go back to, and you aren't even a fully developed person yet. In the context of Gregory being trapped at the bottom of the Pizzaplex, giving up on him is just straight up leaving him for dead. And on the very base, visceral level, every child emotionally understands to be alone and uncared for in this world is to be as good as dead. When Gregory says, "Don't give up on me yet," he's asking for the same thing every kid with a permanent record a mile long or a deeply unfortunate family history and life circumstances crosses their fingers for over and over. To still have some form of support in spite of all the awful things. To still have someone to bounce back to instead of being dropped like a stuffed animal with bugs crawling out of it as penance for their failings as a person or some inherent undesirability they must have. To be given some grace. This whole in detention on your last strike angle on Gregory is especially apt, because in spite of being a child in the Dead Kids franchise, Gregory is very much not a model of innocence and victimhood. That's Vanessa. Gregory instigates some awful robot body horror and engages in basically animatronic medical malpractice with Freddy. He's aggressive, he's mouthy, he's impatient. If we go out of our way to connect some dots, he's also probably patient 46. He's almost certainly killing his and Vanessa's therapists, or at the very least, knowingly pointing whoever's doing the murders in the therapist's general directions. We don't know why he does this. We don't even know if he's actually made of flesh or secretly a robot child, but if he is a robot, he is very clearly a troublemaking kid first and a robot second. Why he is doing these things, and the unclear lore reasons for why he is the way he is, don't actually matter. We, the player, are presented with our player character, a demonstrably competent, cunning, homeless kid who's really good with computers and actively lies to sweet, supportive, well-meaning Freddy about decommissioning Freddy's friends! And via that one line that has haunted me for the past month or so, we, the player, are then asked, does this kid still deserve your love and sympathy? Are he and his life worth salvaging? Are you gonna give up on this kid and leave him to decay and fall apart? When the children in danger are empty pixels devoid of any discernible personality, it is incredibly easy and natural to say, yes, SAVETHEM. Maybe we can't save him, or maybe it's really hard and stupid, but of course we try and save the kid in the Dead Kids franchise. When we have a clear view of what a cagey, messy person this child you're currently engaging with is, suddenly a yes or a no holds so much more weight. That yes or no then crosses over into incredibly complex thematic territory when you consider that the person you save in the pixelated game's Insecurity Breach is Vanessa. Vanessa, resident adult with a job, is doomed by the narrative, but Gregory, some kid with no support network, is the player character, objectively the one in the game with the most plot armor. Vanessa, like all the kids who were dead before the story starts, is completely powerless throughout this game. Gregory, like Michael Afton in Pizzeria Simulator and Sister Location before him, knows more than the player. One of the endings in Security Breach involves Gregory going way out of his way to save Vanessa, an adult woman who he, as a grubby, bandaged, homeless child in a place he is not supposed to be at night, is very on edge around. Gregory has to choose to trust that Glamrock Freddy is right about Vanessa not being a bad person who wants to hurt him, and then he has to go through the incredibly inconvenient and time-consuming process of attempting to save her. In that same way, Cassie, our shiny new player character, is being set up as Gregory's only lifeline in a situation where the process of being that lifeline is deadly and unpleasant and undesirable. We have to choose now to trust that Gregory is a kid worth saving, because even if he is powerful and capable enough to thwart the things binding Vanessa to Glitchtrap in one context, in this context, he needs rescuing. Gregory saying, "Don't give up on me yet," feels like a culmination of an idea that comes to the table when you feature kids and adults alike in horrific situations with equal weight. When you have a kid who's mysterious and kinda sinister, and an adult who is such an open book, the game points out how ill-chosen the name for her brainwashed alter ego is. This idea that being a kid and being an adult is the same experience when you're scared and powerless. This idea that everyone has different relationships with power and control and fear, and exploring this idea through the lens of places and things made for children and maintained by adults, or at least they're supposed to be regularly maintained. The existence or non-existence of a barrier between a scared kid and a scared adult, like, at all. It's all right there. It's all just mixed together in this big pile that I love. Vanessa was always relying on Gregory to put the pieces together because she is as good as dead without his skills and position, trapped in her own mind, forever. We've played as the powerless security guard caught in the crossfire of Peepaw Afton's dead kid-centric agenda. We know! It's terrifying! Now, we're playing as a highly competent, slightly manipulative, scrappy little boy. He has no qualms about putting robots in trash compactors, and will complain to your face about how inconvenient your emergency exits are. And he's just as scared as Vanessa. He is barely keeping it together. Children are capable of incredible cruelty and malice, trust me, I know. But you know what's really bad for a child's development into a half-decent human? Being the implement of a supernatural immortal serial killer, by which I mean the wizard's favorite apprentice. Being homeless, living in poverty. If you are a child growing up under these conditions, you do not develop an affinity for masks and small, hidden, dark places out of a sense of security in your life situation. Gregory doesn't destroy these animatronics out of any specific vendetta, aside from the grief they've caused him over the last 5 hours. He doesn't avoid Vanessa like the plague because he knows she's Vanny already. He does these things because he's trapped in a big, open, camera-filled space that doesn't feel safe, and his only cubbyhole is an incredibly chatty, very power-inefficient metal bear who is supposed to be on lockdown! Gregory and Vanessa are bound together, not just by the Princess Quest Glitchtrap nonsense, but through their shared fear. This pizzaplex is built upon the corpses of corpses. There is something very wrong here, and they're both powerless in the face of it. They are both trapped in the same awful little box, but they are both polar opposites. Vanessa is trapped inside the role of an abused child stumbling through the dark, and Gregory is contending with the horrors at a constant close proximity, trying desperately to keep composed and not be found. This is why Glamrock Freddy is the best part of that game. Like, he cares equally deeply for this literal child who's a bit of a terror, and this woman bound to the role children in this franchise are doomed to repeat as long as they keep rolling out more installments. He just wants to do right by the both of them. Also, he is simply a delight the entire time. By far, the most precious, innocent, dad-shaped character in the entire franchise. I love him so much. The franchise as a whole has evolved from a straightforward black box theater experience that squeezes your brain and gets you feeling things into this messy collage of disparate themes that swirl and spiral out from foundational concepts of death, power, and unreasonable levels of stress. How powerlessness from the perspective of a child and the perspective of an adult are fundamentally different things and yet the same. How poverty irrevocably changes how you experience the world. How loss never stops being loss and you have to just live with that. The nature of betrayal and agony, and how not just our souls but the objects and locations of our lives are scarred and weathered by the events that transpire with them. Abandoned places and people, and how neglect nigh immediately leads to decay. There is so much here. There's so much here. I had to cut out like 2.5 pages worth of stuff from different sections of the video, and I still think there's so much more to say that I haven't even touched on. If my thoughts and my style of writing are brain candy to you and you want to see those paragraphs, you can pop over to my Ko-Fi page and check them out for the same amount it costs to obtain 4 gumballs, or less than a single Snickers bar. Or you could decide, I think that's enough candy, but I also think this articulated, entertaining stranger deserves a tip for the enrichment contributed to my enclosure today. You can do that for the same price, or higher if you're ambitious. If half my current subscriber count chucked $1 American into my little tip jar, I'd have more than $300, which is enough for like so many trips to the laundromat. And then I could continue to provide enclosure enrichment. Thanks so much for watching, and who knows, maybe the real jump scares were the friends we made along the way.